We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are honored to work and serve on this land. Reachability stands with protesters across Canada, the United States, and across the globe, demanding an end to police brutality and racism. We acknowledge the deep and powerful challenges faced by the Black community in Nova Scotia, Canada, and beyond. Black lives matter. And good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us at this very special evening dedicated to artists from the disability community, but really the message and the beauty of art and the words and how they can work together. I'm Tova Sherman, the CEO of Reachability and the author of the book, and I do this because if I get it wrong, you won't mind, Win, 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 the 18 inclusionisms you need to become an employer of choice, a disability, confident employer. So with that, if I should get my book name right, that would be a great start. With it tonight, what I wanted to do is take the opportunity to introduce you to a number of the artists who are engaged in this book project. Let me explain. For many years, my team has made a great deal of fun of me. I always have sayings for everything. And we always called them inclusionisms. Isms around inclusion. Makes sense. But we decided finally, after a number of years, to put those best inclusionisms together in support of businesses understanding what it takes to be a disability confident employer. If that's a concept you haven't really heard before, or words you haven't heard put together, you're not alone. But the reality is that if we are to be truly inclusive in this country of our citizens living with disability, we have to be confident enough never to exclude. This book is dedicated to all persons living with disabilities who have felt the sting of inclusion, the silence that stigma brings on, and have had to deal with constant barriers instead of an equalized playing field. Reachability, in partnership with the Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival, are so pleased to be able to bring these talented artists together in order to really express, both from my words and their art, the importance of inclusion of all people. I'd also like to share a little bit of my thinking around a book like this, having art as such a primary place in it. I believe firmly that, like any other pursuit in life, artists from the disability arts community deserve a monetization of their work. Sometimes we feel like somehow because the person has a disability, their work doesn't have the same value. Au contraire, in many ways it has more. But what we're here to talk about today is the importance of thinking about artists with disabilities when you, as a business person, as a disability confident employer, wishes to perhaps add something to your lobby or create a whole new look. What you want to do is think about inclusion beyond just the hiring, but also in everything you do as a business. And this book is dedicated to all of the people who wish for that to be the case. Anyone who believes in the importance of including persons with disabilities. Anyone who believes in equalizing the playing field for all of our citizens. And that is what Win, Win, Win is truly all about. We're going to visit all of the artists I could gather up on a Zoom call one at a time based on, again, the order of the book. We're going to walk through some of the isms, but also really tonight I want to hear from those artists and what inspired them, and really talk a little bit about the process. Each artist has a different, unique medium. Each brings something different and unique to that medium. And I can't say enough about how proud I am to have each and every inclusionism represented by such a fine, creative, artistic mind. I was hoping every artist could arrive this evening and join us, but the majority of them have been able to, and we're awfully pleased about that. So grab your cold drink, your hot drink, your friends, your family, and don't miss this next hour and a half, 2 hours at the most, I promise, where we're going to visit each artist, each piece, and each ism. I can't imagine a better way to introduce you to win, win, win. And without further ado, I think I want to talk a little bit about the very first ism, which is in fact win, win, win. I want you to know that win, win, win came out of a very simple business concept. Many years ago in the 70s and 80s, there was a business guru by the name of Stephen Covey. And Mr. Covey used to talk a lot about win, win. Meaning, for instance, if you're a used car salesman in the old days, you just try to get that car out of the lot, but never worry about bringing that customer back. That was win-lose. Mr. Covey talked a great deal about win-win, the idea that not just the used car dealer should win, but even the person buying the car could win. Get a decent price, maybe not as good as he liked. The used car salesman, maybe he didn't get as much money as he'd hoped to get, but he made a decent profit, and that man's going to tell his friends and come back. That's really a great way of understanding win-win. But from day one of Reachability, and from day one of the Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival, and from day one for me personally, win-win was not enough. There had to be a third win in everything we do. Win one, well, obviously working in our community and advocating on behalf of persons with disabilities in the disability arts community is a win. The Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival wins anytime we have an opportunity like this one to share the talents, to equalize the playing field for people living within the disability arts community, to create a voice, a first-person voice, not for us, without us. That means if it's about us, let's make sure it's our art talking to it. What an exciting opportunity this is, and what an exciting place to be with all of these very diverse artists in our book. So, we have a third win, as I mentioned. We have our clients winning. We have the artists winning. We have the community winning, because they get access to the extraordinarily diverse voice and creativity of all of these artists. So for all of you who are looking for a business book, but also to let people know you're disability confident and it matters to you, let's make sure we show them some of the incredible art that's happening right here and right now, and how we can relate it to sayings such as win, win, win. Which brings me to our very first artist, Jeffrey. Jeffrey and I have known each other for a couple of years now, and he is a designer and printer who lives in Halifax. His current work draws inspiration from words and language. Who better to talk about win, win, win? And the way in which they affect the way we perceive people and the environment around us. Welcome, Jeffrey, and thank you so much for joining us during this very challenging time.
You're welcome, Tova.
Jeffrey, I loved the way you created a panel that spoke to win-win in a number of different languages. Could you tell us first a little bit about what informs your art and why you chose this particular piece?
My art is basically based on words, through design or through printing, specifically letterpress printing. I spend a lot of time with type, with language, and just how it develops and informs our environment and our communications with one another.
That makes perfect sense. Please go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of the process of the languages chosen, it was basically just a Google search and Google Translate. So some of those translations might be wrong, they might be right. I'm really not 100% sure, but Google does its best and I do my best, so that's just where it's at.
That's very fair. I know for a fact that you've done a number of different works, and I've purchased your work before. In that, again, those words and letters and the power and how you're able to bring life to things and through those words. And I think that's a powerful medium for an artist. Can you tell me why words for you? Is that like something you can sort of share with me?
It is. Language was always one of those things that I've struggled with. I still struggle with. So there's just this keen interest in how people interact with language and how they use language to express themselves, which was something that I always struggled with. I'm the type of person who sits on the edges. I'm more of an observer, and my interactions are quite introverted with people. I'm very quiet, quite shy, and I don't know what else to say.
I think you're saying a lot. Let me ask you, if you don't mind, Jeffrey, one more question, and that is, what would you like people to know about artists within the disability community, if anything, and the importance of providing a voice and a place for all of us to view the work that's going on?
My big thing is just give people a chance. Be kind and just be accepting. It's more than just tolerating that people are there. It's accepting people for who they are, where they're at, and just enjoying the experience of what everyone has to offer.
I really appreciate that, and I can't tell you enough. You did a particular project for us around I Make a Difference, and every member of my staff has it hanging up, and really we cherish both the colors that speak to us as well as the message, and the way you were able to sort of capture it within the letter work that you did. And I wanted to let you know we've all gained so much pleasure out of it, and we continue to. And I want to thank you for this contribution, especially for Win Win Win, which is really where it all begins for me. So I'm so grateful that you were able to be part of this project, and I want to thank you for all that you do and for being one of the many people who speak up in this community and let us know the importance of kindness and honesty and integrity. So thank you for that very much, and have a wonderful day, and we'll get you one of these books ASAP, okay?
Great, thank you, Tola.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Be well, my friend.
You too.
So thank you so much again to Jeffrey, because really I can't imagine opening without something that's extremely powerful, and I have found his art from day one to be extremely powerful and for me personally really impactful. One sometimes thinks, well, it's letters, but he has had a very adept, in my opinion, just at bringing a tremendous amount of emotion to what one would think of as being, well, just letters. It's so much more. So again, I thank him for that. The next ism in the book is diversity without inclusion is like a house without a foundation. And it would have been so easy for our next guest, Trudy Fong, to talk a little bit about it. But she took the idea and really made it her own, and I'm excited about that. But first I want to tell you about Trudy, because Trudy, first of all, has worked for many years as a journalist and an author before embracing her inner artist. It sounds like she was embracing it already to me. But she says she's clumsy, and following several severe falls, she had to have a full hip replacement, which sounds really challenging. So learning how to walk again, it was really for her a wake-up call. And I'll be interested in hearing more about that, because when she's not creating art or writing, she cares for several relatives who also have health challenges. Trudy lives in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. And Trudy, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. And of course, I have to say, I loved how you took a house without a foundation, turned it into a coffee without a cup, because I think it speaks a lot to the importance of having a place to land if you're going to put something in it, right? So Tracy, again, tell me a little bit about your journey, if you would, around, well, like you said, this whole idea of having a wake-up call around going beyond the writing and into the art.
No, well, I've had several wake-up calls.
Oh, okay.
You notice the rainbow in the coffee pot. I have LGBTQ children, so I've had to go through the experience of watching them struggling with issues of acceptance as well. And then, of course, I have my own issue, which is extreme clumsiness. I have life dyslexia, also known as dyspraxia. which means that I just have a lot of accidents. I had one where I fell off a ladder and severed a big chunk of muscle in my leg. Then I fell down an entire flight of stairs and caused a lot of damage to cartilage in my leg, which got worse and worse until it reached the point where I was not able to get out of the chair without assistance. Was not able to really walk at all without agony, and ended up with a full hip replacement and going through those whole challenges. And that was also following a ski accident years ago. So I've gone through issues with 6 months in a cast from ankle to hip. So I've had the wake up call of having an ability and then having it disappear, and realizing the challenges that people face that everybody else is just taking for granted. How easy it is, for example, to go up and down an aisle in an airplane, or crossing a street that has high snowbanks, and then suddenly there you are, with your crutches, trying to get across big heaps of snow, going over ice, all these obstacles that people have taken completely for granted if they don't have a mobility issue. And so that was a real wake-up call for me. And it takes a lot of work to get back. And there you are. That was... I guess that was my inspiration.
Well, I really appreciate that, because I don't think we always consider how maybe not perceiving oneself as living with disability, and then, of course, experiencing that. Often we just assume someone was born and that was it. But what I like about you, Trudy, is that you're bringing this newfound sort of like light bulb effect. Here I am, and now I'm going to take it. But why did you go from writer, who to me, by the way, I will not underrate the writer in you and say the writer is a great artist as well, but what got you going into more of a visual art approach? How did that turn into visual arts, I guess I want to know.
Well, when I was a kid, I was very introverted, and I was always in my room, and I was always drawing and reading and writing, and as I grew up, I became a journalist, but I was always doing art on the side. And I always thought that art was something that was taking me away from what I ought to be doing, because at that time there were a lot of magazines, there was a living to be made, I was raising my kids and making money as a freelancer at home. And so I always thought of art as something that I ought not to be doing, because it was keeping me away from that thing which I had done my education for. I did a journalism degree and a couple other degrees, and so I always thought that I looked at life in terms of what I ought to be doing and what I should be doing. And then I would get carried away by my passion for art, and then I think, oh, but this doesn't pay. I shouldn't be doing this. And then I also keep an illustrated journal. And for years I kept a diary or a journal. And then one day I said, what would happen if I went without lines? Just what would happen if I got a book that didn't have lines? And then I just started drawing in the pages. And now what I do is every entry that I make, I think of what is in front of me now. Is it in the news? What have I experienced? What am I looking at? So I'm never lacking for inspiration. And then I draw what I'm experiencing, and then I write about it. So the two are connected. And then also when I paint or draw, because I've moved pretty solidly into art, when I do it, I believe that art should tell a story, and that it should be about something. It's not just a picture of a flower. It's a picture of a flower is great, but why did you get that flower? What is the meaning of that flower? Is the flower in vase, or is it still free? Is it still out there? What is the meaning? For example, I did a drawing of an aerialist with a wheelchair on the side, and the reason why I did that is because she has escaped the chair for the moment when she's in the air.
Well, we're revisiting you on that picture. I'm coming back to you with that particular ism and that graphic as well. So what I want to say right now, Trudy, with your permission, is to give you something to think about for when we come back. And that is, I'd really like to know your advice for people who are looking at art as a move and are terrified at the idea of allowing themselves to believe in that. And I think you've got a lot to say about it, but I'd love to come back because it gives people something to hold on to. And we're going to talk to you about that in a little bit. Thank you, because you do appear twice in the book, and we think that the vision is so powerful again and very, very real and takes you to a really lovely place. So I'm looking forward to showing everyone the next ism that you're going to be in. So we're going to visit you in a minute again. Thank you, Trudy, and don't you go away, okay? I'll be right back. So what I wanted to do now is tell you about our next ism. I always say there are two ways to ensure inclusion. And people often ask me, what do I mean by this? So let me just take a moment and tell you about this particular inclusionism. There are two ways to ensure inclusion: education and osmosis. What do I mean? Well, I think education is fairly self-explanatory. If the only place you've ever learned, let's say, about a disability is in the schoolyard, or perhaps people whispering, or in a movie, or in CNN News, they never report about the person who's doing well with a disability. You're never going to hear the story of the bipolar person who is married, has 3 kids, holding down 2 jobs, doing great, because that's not what the news is looking for. So if our education around disability comes from the news and the schoolyard, which can be a very cruel place, or whispers at home about the silly cousin or whatever it is, I can assure you that is not going to build disability confidence in anybody. So education is clearly very important. But I also wanted to explain that osmosis, and what we mean by that here is that I often, when I do training across Canada, and I talk about inclusion and the ease of working with people with all types of disabilities, I can always tell if someone has worked alongside a person, for instance, who uses a wheelchair. I might be talking about something as simple as sitting next to a person who uses a wheelchair, so they don't have to crick their neck all day talking to you. And I'll see someone in the crowd doing this. And I know immediately that person has worked with someone who uses a wheelchair. And all of those mysteries have already been removed. And they'll put their hand up and go, oh, I work with Madge. She's amazing. It's no big deal. Just maybe don't touch her wheelchair because you may not know it's an extension of herself. And that's osmosis. You remove so much when you combine education and osmosis, but without either, you cannot be disability confident in your workplace. So with that, I want to introduce you to our next artist, who is Ellie Hannon, or Eleanor. I hope I can call you Ellie. Should it be Eleanor or Elle? Okay, great, because Ellie sounds so sweet. Ellie Hannon is a Halifax-based illustrator, a recent fine arts grad of our own NSCAD University in Nova Scotia. She's passionate about art, accessibility, and how the two intersect. So I was really thrilled that she was able to help us out with the ism around education osmosis. Welcome, Ellie.
Hi.
Ellie, I'm going to start with something that's very straightforward, which is what inspired you to create this particular piece in reference to education and osmosis? And you should know that our viewers are seeing the piece right now, even if you and I are not, okay?
Okay. Yeah, so I was thinking about what you were just talking about, and a lot of my work is very figurative and involves people, and I wanted to make something that was joyful and clear, and I really liked the image of sitting alongside. These two people are intended to be working together. They're in somewhat of a uniform, but just talking about how valuable it is to learn from actually working alongside us and us alongside people with various disabilities, and how you can build that understanding through relationships and not exclusively through learning about it.
I like how I'm so sorry, I really love the way that you showed educational osmosis in one view, but I have a real artist question if you don't mind. I'm fascinated by your color choices, especially in this piece. I don't know that I have seen those colors together in a context like this, and I wanted you to know I found it very, it drew me in, and I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about your color use there, if that's okay.
Yeah, well, I was really careful to make sure that these two people, one of them has a visible disability, the other person we're not sure, but I did want to make sure that these two people are wearing the same color and that it really stood out, that they're equal in the scenario, whether this is an employer and an employee or two coworkers.
I love it.
So I kind of wanted the blue to be to stand out on them, and then the background to be very warm, because it's supposed to be a very positive conversation, I guess.
That's fantastic. Now, Ellie, I'm making you come back again because you also have two pieces in this. So I don't want to use up all my exciting questions, but I am going to ask you when you come back a little bit about your experience in a fine arts school, because that's also a very interesting experience. And also, I know you have a number of passions in the art field, and we'd love to hear more about that. So I'm prepping you for the next visit we're going to have. And thank you again. It's so nice to see you, Ellie, really. So I wanted to give everybody a heads up because the heads up, that's like a funny little saying, because we're now going to look over my head and behind my head, if you're on my screen, because we're going to be visiting Lee Cripps. And I just want to tell you a little bit about this particular ism. The fish stinks from the head is a pretty straightforward statement. At Reachability, I'm the CEO, and I'm responsible for a lot of people, clients, community, what we state, how we represent, and I take it all very seriously. And when I speak to employers, especially leaders around disability confidence, I'm always talking about how important it is that this is coming from the top down. If we do not see commitment to inclusion from the top, then the folks in the middle management and even at the entry point won't see that value. So I talk a lot about the importance of the fish stinking from the head, and I gotta tell you, Lee Cripps, that what a fantastic piece, and I've been so excited to talk to you and talk about this inclusionism. But first I should say that Lee is a Dartmouth-born multidisciplinary artist, a curator, a mother, and a spiritualist. She says she's prone to anxiety-wrapped neuroses, a lovely first course to stress-induced panic, and finding four-leaf clovers. I hope I did that any justice at all, Lee, because that's so magnificent, and I just sort of stumbled through. But most importantly, let's welcome Lee Cripps. Hi, Lee.
Thank you. Hi, Tola. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm sorry we can't be together tonight, but if you can see my head and see over it, you can recognize the piece that we're referring to, which is one of the most colorful pieces in the book. And I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about the piece and the way in which it came about from an artist's point of view.
Well, it's funny. I was rereading my artist statement that I sent you in preparation for this call, and I found it interesting that I did the painting. The saying that you sent me really struck me from a leadership point of view, because I feel like I struggle as a leader. I'm so introverted, and I second guess myself all the time, and I don't feel that I'm, a great leader in a lot of aspects, just from a gallery manager point of view. But I think that everything that happened this year with the shutdown really sent me reeling in a mental health capacity, and the meaning of that phrase has really changed for me in terms of my original statement highlighted leadership as developing relationships a lot, and now looking back at the painting that I did, I love colors and I love expression, but I'm looking more now at the fish bones as highlighted for me in post COVID shutdown, I guess. And I think, it's so funny how we're so prone to judge people on the surface when there is a lot going on underneath the surface that I think a lot of people do hide when they're relating to each other in public or within their families or friends. You don't always know what people are going through, so it really is important to not take things for face value and give people the benefit of the doubt, which is really kind of hard sometimes.
Lee, one thing you said there that's just grabbing me, and so I'm gonna bring it back to you because I think it's so powerful, is the fact that you're seeing different things in a painting that you yourself created based on where you are at that moment. And I think that also gives permission to the rest of us to do the same. And I think that's a very powerful piece of information that we should continue to look at the art and continue as we grow as individuals and our community changes as it has to really see what else it might be informing today. And I think it's magnificent that you as the artist are able to continue to look at it and continue to find new ways of seeing it. It inspires me to want to do the same and to keep looking. And I really thank you for that, because I think that's giving us all permission to continue to look at the work and ask ourselves what else we see. Now, Lee, you and I are visiting each other, I know, again, because you have two pieces in this book. And so I want to save something for a little later, but I'm really excited again to talk a little bit more to you about your second piece and what drove that. And again, a little more around your color use, because you have some of the most dynamic and beautiful color combinations. And I have to really say how much I appreciate that and have enjoyed it. So hopefully you won't run away from me and stick around just for a little bit longer, and we'll be coming back to visit you. Okay? I thank you so much, Lee. And I love the rooster behind you. We're going to have to talk. All right. Thank you again to our friend Lee, who will, in fact, visit us again later in our conversation and later with some of these isms that we're discussing from the book, Win, 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 the 18 inclusionisms you need to become a disability-confident employer. There's no way to talk about inclusion and not talk about stigma. Stigma really, for me, exists in silence. And that's where its power is. Because as long as we're not talking about inclusion and fear and issues and things we imagine, the myths around disability that we've created because of the sources of where we learned it, which we talked a little bit about earlier. So to me, a statement like stigma's power is in silence is very powerful and very important. And I'm really, really glad that Lindsay Reed joined us, because Lindsay uses art to express that internal experience as a way of sharing her perspectives with others. As a person who has a traumatic brain injury, her art is really expressing her experience of having a disability that others simply don't see. So welcome, 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 Lindsay Reed, and thank you. And wow, nice hat. Got to get me one. That's super sharp. I'm not going to say the word Halifax around you there, Dartmouth lady. I know the deal. Lindsay, I was so impressed because your piece speaks to a lot of things. And I wondered if you could tell us about it rather than me trying to pull out of you, because right now everyone watching us is seeing that piece. And if you could assist us in really understanding what your messaging is rather than me trying to tell it and probably making you very unhappy with my ruining everything. So Lindsay, tell me a little bit about what that artwork meant to you.
So it's an iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg would be what people see, which is what a normal looking person would look like, right? No cast, nothing wrong with them, no crutches, not in a wheelchair. Underneath is a very confused, what's going on in my brain. So imagine yourself driving down Spring Garden Road at night in a rainstorm, rush hour traffic, about 80 kilometers an hour, with all the pedestrians crossing. So that's kind of like what's going on in my brain most of the time is a lot of confusion. And so trying to sort that out and explain that to people is very hard. So this is kind of the concept that I came up with. I just call it my TBI art or percussion art, because a lot of people don't even know what a TBI is, which is a traumatic brain injury.
I love the fact that there's some black and white, but then there's all the colored. And I wondered if you could also share a little bit about why you made that decision, if you don't mind.
The black and white definitely being the world around me, everything being so black and white. And the color being what people don't get to see from people like me, from who I am or who I was to who I am now. Like, it's hard to express, right?
Right.
So with all the color and joy that I do have, it's still there. It's just hard to get out. So my art helps me to kind of explain that to people.
I really appreciate it, and I think that it's a piece that speaks to exactly what we're talking about: the power of judging people, the power of assuming you understand, the power of believing that you know what to do and you know what's going on, but really not necessarily knowing it all. And I thought that there was such a deep intelligence in your piece, because it spoke to the fact that we have to stop looking at just the obvious, the chip. You know, people, they say, judge each other within the first 7 seconds of meeting each other. And I thought about that when I saw your piece, because I thought that's about 7 seconds worth of a person, and then there's this whole incredible human being, right? So it really rung so strongly to me, that idea of the 7 seconds, or how quickly we judge, and how so much more is there. And as long as we're not talking about it, the silence and the stigma is winning. And I think that your piece demands conversation. And for that reason alone, I thank you very much for your contribution. And I think that it comes across very powerfully in both your use of color and your decision on how to go forward with this saying. So thank you for your time. I'm really excited to get you to sign the photograph in my book. I'm going to bother you all somehow. I don't know. We're going to wait for COVID, or I'm going to have somebody go bang on your door and with a pen and ask you to just sign and run. I promise it won't be a blank check. It will be the book, okay? So I want to thank you for your time, Lindsay, and thank you again for your contribution to this important work. All the best to you. And that was our good friend Lindsay, who really has contributed some exciting ideas to the concept of stigma and the power of stigma and how it sits in silence. Look, the next ism I want to talk about is a fact. I don't even know if it gets to be called an ism. It's just a fact. And the fact is, every one of us will have had, has, or will have a disability in our lifetime. I don't care if it's episodic, you had a ski accident in Vail, or something a little more serious. The fact remains, as we age, not just our bodies, but also our brains age. They're all organs. So the idea that we have had this ability to stigmatize, and the idea that we're judging about disability when in fact it's everyone, just makes me crazy. So I was so glad when Susan McLeod drew a particular piece for us that is so interesting around these some older adults that were basically, I think it was your parents, but let's welcome Susan, because I don't want to get this wrong. And she's writing this wonderful graphic memoir about communication failures that plagued the family through the years, and I just don't want to mess this up. And Susan, I'm so excited to hear about it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were thinking and how it related to everyone has had, and will have a disability, and then I want you to go right into what your project is, because I'm excited.
Thank you, Tuba, and it's a real honor to be here and to be included in the book, and it's so nice to see all the other artists as well. So this sketch is from a series I did in nursing homes, and I shepherded my mother through 9 years of long-term care, right from assisted living to a nursing home at the end when she died at age 99. And I was rather shocked at the kind of care that is given. It's excellent clinical care. People are fed, but there's, in our experience, we've found a real dearth of compassion and of seeing people as people instead of things that needed to be processed every day with so much funding, which was never enough funding, of course. And so I wanted, after experiencing this in nursing homes, I wanted to find a respectful way to show what I discovered, which is that people who are very old and frail and have the limitations that come with age that we indeed will all face if we're so lucky to live to a ripe old age, that these people are, of course, still people. They're just like you and me. So I hit upon just going in. I went into a few different nursing homes. I got permission to just sketch people and simply note what they're saying or what they're thinking or what the context is. I wanted their own voice. I didn't want to put a layer of interpretation from me onto it. I wanted to show them as people very much alive and who have a lot of rich memories and experiences to share as well. And this particular couple, they lived together in Northwood. I can't go into nursing homes now because of COVID. I was with a person who leads Elder Dog, and what she's trying to do is bring dogs into nursing homes so that they actually, at some point in the future, will actually live in a nursing home and provide the kind of companionship that people really need there, that their funding doesn't allow from other humans. So that was a really great project. Now, my graphic memoir is called Dying for Attention. It's a graphic memoir about nursing home care, that's the subtitle. And I'm making it humorous, but it's my experience with my mother through these 9 years of long-term care, through all the catch-22s, all the absurdities that the system throws up, how difficult the system makes it for people employed in the system to be compassionate. And the irony is that at one point in my career, I was the government spokesperson, defending the very policies that as a user I now saw as quite inhumane. And as is not uncommon when you have a parent declining and in care, our family had conflict. So I'm looking at that in a funny way in my book, and my book is interspersed with research that shows why compassion is so important, how families fall out and why, and what can be done about it, and just government systems.
I have to tell you what I loved about your piece in particular was the lightness of the color and the way that you drew the characters for me made it, I could imagine seeing your graphic memoir and being able to go through this difficult stuff even through the humor, because the art itself lightens the subject to some degree, and I wanted to acknowledge I found that to be really a refreshing and helpful almost in terms of, again, when you address difficult subjects, sometimes things don't necessarily have to be dark in order to absorb them, and I just found your freshness and your color use was really, really, I thought, important to keeping us able to get the message but still feel that little bit of whimsy that you clearly have in the things that you talk about.
Yes, thank you. And that was my intent. I could have written a book. I have a background as a writer, freelance writer, but I wanted it to be accessible. And I thought that if it wasn't funny, if I wasn't looking at it with rueful eyes or with a little bit of irony, or that it would be too painful. I wanted humor and the lightness of a graphic memoir, which are essentially cartoons, to draw people in. And I think when you look at drawings, you're looking at them through perhaps a more emotional part of your brain than when you're reading. So I wanted to use that to access that part of the brain in the readers.
I really appreciate it. And as you know, that was part of our goal with this book, was to bring both the words and the emotions that only art can, in my opinion, bring forward to go with these messaging in hopes of even impacting on a number of levels, whether consciously or not necessarily as consciously, but the idea of utilizing all of these ways to bring in the message on a really deep level. So, Susan, I want to thank you for your work, and I'm really excited to be one of the first to purchase your graphic novel, memoir, which I'm very excited about. So thank you very much for joining us, because it means a lot to us that your piece is in our book. So
comes out next October from Conundrum Press.
Fantastic. You heard it here first, Conundrum Press. Thank you very much. Now, at this point, I want to just keep rolling, because there's a lot of artists and a lot of inclusionisms. And frankly, I want you to know I used to believe that we were like IKEA furniture, that maybe we could come with instructions. And it took me a very long time to understand the power of the fact that people don't come with instructions. And that's our next inclusionism. Because basically Reach was built on the very idea that each person has to have an individualized approach. Just because you meet Tova, who lives on the ADHD spectrum, does not mean you then know everything someone with ADHD spectrum might experience. We're all uniquely different. And people don't come with instructions is one of those really core messages that the Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival has stood by, because we want to see everyone voice it their way. It's not our judgment that matters, it's allowing the artist a place to express. And People Don't Come With Instructions allows each artist, in a sense, to speak to their truth, and each human to speak to theirs, and each employee in your workplace to be able to be accommodated as per their need, not the need of the last person who had the same letters in their disability, right? So with that, I'm really happy to bring back Ellie, because Ellie, I really love this drawing that you've done, because, you know, it seems a little bit of a self-portrait to some degree. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the work that you did around People Don't Come With Instructions.
Yeah, hi. So I did take this opportunity to make a self-portrait, and I did want to take it a little bit literally as far as my drawing approach. So I made essentially kind of a blueprint of myself. And then some accommodations, it's a little tricky to see, but some accommodations I particularly might need if I'm having a bad day. And I was just thinking about it from that point of view of, yeah, you can't assume to know or understand someone's needs without relating to them on a personal, individual level. And as a person with invisible disabilities, I felt it was a good opportunity to, as many of us have, to explore that and just show some things that you might not see that I need on a given day.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess what really interested me was your decision to also do kind of versions of that. And could you help me understand, is there any, maybe I'm putting too much meaning in everything, but is there a meaning to two standing, one sitting?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the accommodations for me would be sitting. I deal with a lot of pain, and so the first is a more obvious way that you might be able to tell that I'm hurting, which is when I have to wear a sling. And then, like, you might not see anyone's given medication. And then the second one is a more obvious, like, needing to sit down and rest and take an out. And that's something that I experience a lot in the workplace and in school. So.
You know, Ellie, my husband particularly loved this one, and I'll tell you why. He lives with invisible disability, and he always says that people just assume because he's a burly guy, even if he tells them straight out, I have physical issues, I can't lift over a certain amount, they tell him, he tells them, and the next day it's like, well, you can do that. Do you find that frustration if they don't see it, they don't know it's there or believe it's there? That's got to be so frustrating.
What is frustrating is the exhaustion that I'm sure a lot of us feel constantly announcing ourselves and self-advocating in situations where people will assume that you can do things outside of maybe your comfort level or ability, and then having to point it out. And sometimes it can be easier for someone like me to maybe let themselves get a little bit hurt or a little uncomfortable rather than always talking about it. And I feel like that frustration is real.
Yeah. I always feel like if somebody says you look great, you want to say thank you, but that doesn't mean it's not true. And I just think the importance of People Not Coming Instructions, especially for people with invisible disabilities, is so important because we can't possibly know. And we have to believe that no one would want that to be going on. And I think for employers in particular, it's an extremely important piece to think about, is that although it might seem like we're all the same or we only have minor differences, we have to get to know each person. And remember, we are not IKEA furniture. We do not come with instructions. And certainly I think that your representation of that was really, really, really on point, on mark. So thank you very much for that as well.
I think it really just comes down to communication with an individual, especially as an employer, making sure you really understand the people that you're working with. And thank you for the opportunity.
No, we've enjoyed both pieces that you were able to contribute, and I think that they lend a great deal to the overall. So this time I'll really let you go. I'm very grateful to see you a second time, and of course we're very happy for the contribution that you were made, and thank you again. We'll be talking to you soon, I know that, Ellie. So take care of yourself. So I want to tell you a little bit about my mom, because my mom is really my muse. Shirley, my mother, is nonverbal. She actually lost her voice box and her esophagus to cancer. So she doesn't speak regularly. She uses what we would call a servox, which is like Stephen Hawking, I am fine, hello. And I always say she sounds smarter anyway because she sounds like Stephen Hawking. But more importantly, when my mother first had her surgery, I always remember trying to understand what she was saying. I couldn't, and so I'd start to pretend I got it. Like, yeah, Mom, no problem. I got it. And I always remember my mother stopping me one day and going, Tova, when you pretend to understand that which I am telling you, and it's not really what I'm saying, but you're going, yeah, what you're telling me is what I've said isn't important enough to ask. It's not even important enough to be uncomfortable and have to ask me again. You'd rather just, yeah. But that's my dignity, she told me. Dignity, plain and simple. And there's no better example of that than my mother Shirley, and that's why this ism is in there. Because to be honest with you, I learned more about dignity in that one statement than in years of learning about the importance of dignity. Because at that moment, someone I deeply cared for was reminding me that my discomfort was superseding her very right to be heard. And we can never, ever let that happen. And the sooner we realize that, the sooner we'll address it. And so I'm really pleased that Kathy did this really interesting piece around dignity, plain and simple. She is, in fact, a Nova Scotia designer and illustrator. She says her goal for work is to present information visually, to create content that literally fosters understanding. This project unveils disabilities and calls for understanding. And Kathy has dedicated this work to her friends, her loved ones, and all of those who balance daily, literally, sometimes on the edge. So is Kathy going to be joining us? Oh, I'm so sorry, Kathy couldn't make it. But I do want you to know that I want to thank Kathy for her thoughtful work, both as a designer and as an illustrator. And I'm so glad she was able to be part of this, because dignity, plain and simple, is truly a foundational reality. If we are not going to be uncomfortable in order to understand those around us and to learn more about those around us, please know that we're not going to be able to be disability confident employers. We must remember dignity comes first. Often people make fun of me because I'm not so politically correct, whatever that might mean. Maybe it's because I am on the ADHD spectrum and impulse is a bit of an issue, especially verbally. I have to be careful. But what I want you to know is if we always keep dignity in the forefront, I truly believe we're always going to be doing the right thing. And my mother taught that to me, and Kathy did a beautiful job in representing that, and I want to thank her and my mother for that particular ism. Okay, let's move on. Another artist who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, but I'm really pleased was able to participate in the book, is Dorothy Ann Brown. The saying is, in fact, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. And I know there's a few of us, including living with disability and visible disability, who understand that. I mentioned earlier my partner, but the amount of abuse that he received for looking like a linebacker, but having broken his back in a car accident is beyond belief. Because people didn't see it, they thought he was faking. Even his friends, people he knew his whole life, would talk about how this one guy could really work the system. It broke his heart. It broke his heart that not just his workplace questioned him, but his family and friends, because just because they couldn't see it, they assumed it simply wasn't there. And so many of us can relate to the loss of dignity we experience when people think of things that way. So Dorothy Ann Brown is really informed because she's a former healthcare manager and nurse who had to leave work due to the cognitive effects of multiple sclerosis. She's a fiber artist, she's an embroiderer, and she's a freelance writer. And really, Dorothy Ann wanted us to tell you all that her MS has caused some real strong cognitive and mood changes. And even though she often appears fine, she wants all of us to know that's not always the case. Her piece is meant to really illustrate the hidden but still present brain changes in people who, like her, live with damage to the brain, those living with PTSD or trauma, depression, MS, or any brain injury. Let me be very clear. I think that the work that Dorothy Ann did to represent the brain and the way the brain is and how different it can be even though we don't see it, reflects all the way back to one of the other pieces where we got to see a little bit of peeking and realize that we're only seeing a little bit of things, right? So I really felt that this was a beautiful piece, and I know that you're getting a chance to peek at it now, and I loved the multimedia nature, the depth, the texture that this gave, and it really made me think about the many ways the brain can look. And I think it should bring a level of reflection, because just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. So Dorothy Ann is missed, and so is our next artist. Someone that I've spoken to in the past and I'm very fond of. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Nigel Beck. First of all, the ism I'm going to talk about in a moment. Nigel is a very accomplished photographer, and we actually met at a Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival a few years ago. And Nigel was just so moved by the agency and the work we're doing, and we were so impressed by the work he was doing. He was kind enough to donate a piece of art that to this moment sits in our lobby, and people constantly ask me about it. And I certainly hope some people are reaching out to Nigel to get their work done as well, because he's really an accomplished artist. He's actually a Yorkshire, England native, a Royal Air Force veteran of 23 years. And then he moved to Nova Scotia in 2010, where he became a photographer and a mental health advocate. His photography, for me, it's solemn. It has a sense of loneliness that lingers well beyond the piece. And I think that, for me personally, his work is extremely moving. The art itself, well, let me tell you a little bit about the saying. I think that will inform the art. Screen in, not out. Okay, HR people, I know what you're thinking. In every course in university, human resource people, hirers, were always told to screen out. Meaning, if it doesn't fit the box, if it's not matching all the key words and phrases, get rid of it. Well, there's an incredible amount of bias in many of the processes that are used in the hiring field. And that's why I believe you have to screen in, not screen out. If you want to grow your hiring pool, if you want to find truly the right person, right job, then you've really got to screen in, not out. And I think Nigel did a great job allowing us to see something that we wouldn't necessarily put in that particular position, in the juxtaposition of the idea of screening in, not out. Obviously, literally and figuratively, the screen, the arrow, the in, the out. But I just find, again, I love the composition of his photos, and I have consistently found with Nigel, each piece of work stands by itself, yet there's always this sense of aloneness that I think is very poignant. So I want to thank Nigel, who actually appears twice in this book, as do a few artists, as you know. Let's move on, because we have more artists to meet, and I want to make sure we have time for everybody tonight. And right person, right job is one of my favorite sayings, because, well, it's so true. I have never asked anyone to put a circle into a square, to hire an artist to do your financials, and so on. I believe right person, right job. I believe that you use the right tool for the right thing. And I was so excited when I saw Megan McDonald's approach to this, because she's a textile artist and a designer living in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And her creative practice includes making versions of everyday objects through alternative materials. And I was really excited about how she took the idea of right person, right job, exactly where I was imagining it, which is, again, the right tool for the right project. The whole right person, right job idea is the conversation around sustainable employment. If you're going to hire the wrong person, it's not going to work out and nobody wants you to. But if you're not to engage everybody and ensure that you didn't exclude someone because you couldn't pronounce their name, or perhaps they walked with a slight limp, or spoke with a slight lisp, those are not reasons to rule out, and you will be missing the right person, right job. So Megan McDonald, I know you're here, and I cannot tell you how much I love this piece. I know you and I fought over it for a while because I wanted to take it home and put it in my pocket and hoped you wouldn't notice. But the truth is, I really want to hear a little bit about why you chose to make this piece in response to right person, right job. And of course, I really wanted to know a little bit about what informs your art, because you do use so many different textiles and surfaces, and you know, it gives so much dimension and interest to your pieces. So thank you for being here, and I want to hear all about this piece.
Thanks, Tova. So I really like taking an everyday functional object that, you know, most of us I think would recognize, probably held in our hands before, and then reimagining it in a different material. So for this piece in particular, it was part of a larger sort of body of work that was full of all kinds of domestic objects that are created through embroidery. So I used this dissolvable material. It looks really like a piece of plastic, but when it touches water, it disappears. And I use that as a base for embroidering with a sewing machine. So I essentially embroidered onto this plastic material. I stitch so much through my own threads that it really creates its own quite robust textile. And then when I wet it, all of that stabilizer dissolves and I'm left with just the thread. But it's really strong enough to become its own object. And creating this, it's quite three-dimensional, and there are brass rivets that go through. So all of the sections that would typically move in and out in a regular steel pocket knife still have that function and ability within this textile version.
What I loved was the idea that, for me, it was like this Swiss Army knife where you've got 50 tools in a knife or something, and each tool has its own purpose or purposes, and it just seemed really to scream to that whole use the right person for the right job, the right tool for the right job, and there's so many different ones that could be used in so many different ways once you get creative enough to think about it. It doesn't always have to be done just that way. And I just thought there was a lot of different interpretation that could be taken. But I must say that the way in which you make these textiles is so incredibly fascinating to me. And I was so excited about this particular piece because I hadn't seen anything quite like it. And I'm so interested in the way you used the metal, if I'm using the right term for metal, or like the metallic strings. I don't know what to, sorry. But I just thought it's so beautiful and it really drew my eye in. Is there anything you want to say about it in relation to the statement, or maybe I'd like to hear a little bit from you about the power of art to impact these statements? For you personally, being in this book and having the opportunity to take that messaging to another level for people, what's that doing for you, or why is that important to even include art, do you think?
Well, I think that fit in general is so important. I'm sure we've all experienced in so many different ways. You know, a situation that's great for us and a situation that isn't so great for us. For me, you know, I think about times that I've felt a lot of fit in my life was when I was making things, or when I was in art school, for instance. You know, finding those scenarios where the skills that I have could really be used, be appreciated, where I could grow and develop. And so for me, I think using art to, you know, just for personal reasons, to be able to continue that great feeling is really important to me. And I've also been able to work in scenarios where I'm often sort of introducing creative practices to others and watching how maybe someone who doesn't feel like they have a lot of skill, or, you know, it may not be something that they've included in their life in the past, have really taken it on board and kind of blossomed and enjoyed it. So I think that, you know, we talk about fit, of course, being important, you know, with sort of the book, Right Person, Right Job, but also thinking about how we can all kind of continue to develop skills that maybe we didn't know we had before. And I think for a lot of people, creative skills are an area that can be continued to be developed and are so rewarding when it is.
I often say art equalizes the playing field for so many of us because the school tended to be very black and white. You had the right answer or the wrong one. But when we get into the arts, and that's why the Blue Nose that festival, truly, the Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival really exists because of that belief that we need to have places for all voices to be heard. We need to understand that art informs and brings out the emotion that maybe these statements wouldn't be able to bring out. And I think that the matching of these and the ability for people who might face other barriers to express themselves through art is so incredibly powerful. And I think that's what, I think your piece really represents that very well. And I want to thank you for that and for contributing to this, because I do think you were able to really capture, I think, what we're trying to say about both being inclusive, but also understanding that right person doesn't always mean the traditional right person. It can also mean being a little more creative about what that means. So I thank you again for your time, Megan, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more pieces from you since I couldn't get my paws on this one. So we'll have to talk later, but I wish you well, and I thank you again for your contribution.
Thanks so much.
You take care. So, the next artist is someone that I've worked with before and I continue to work with, and I'm certainly very pleased about that. And it relates to a particular statement that I make a lot, and it's specifically around the idea of accommodation. The truth is that over 65% of all people in the workplace in Canada require some form of accommodation. Frankly, I think it's higher. That's the ones talking about it. And this particular inclusionism really addresses that. It's revise, revisit, reassess. And what we mean by that as an inclusionism is the idea that we can never just say, oh, I gave you your chair, I gave you the accommodation, I gave you the window, I gave you the typewriter, whatever it is. Oh my God, I've just aged myself terribly. More importantly, something a little more modern. And the idea is we check back. How's it working? Well, it's actually good. Maybe it was something for your leg which broke, but now your leg is better. You don't need it anymore. If we're not revising, revisiting, and reassessing accommodation, we're not taking it seriously. And taking something like that to an artist must seem a little difficult, but Heidi Hallett has no problem because she's a mixed media artist with an incredible passion for art journaling. Having a daily art practice is key to Heidi's own well-being and management of her illness and her anxiety. And as someone with an invisible disability, one we don't necessarily see, but believe me, she feels it and experiences it in her own way, Heidi uses her art as a form of self-expression. She loves teaching others how they can process very complex emotions and life challenges through art. So welcome, Heidi. I'm so happy to see you. Love the owl. I'm telling you, all these artists have the best work in their own apartments. I'm noticing this. More importantly,
I have to tell you, that's not my work.
Oh God, I'm so sorry, but again, good taste, Heidi. Nonetheless, good taste. We'll talk later. Heidi, what I love,
my talented cousin.
Oh, cool. It's in the family. What I really enjoyed about this piece, and I'm actually grabbing it off the table to show it, because the entire book that you did is really a beautiful piece of reflection. But the one we in particular took to reflect or talk to the idea of revise, revisit, reassess was this wonderful piece around reflection. And I wondered if you could tell us why for you reflection, well, you'll excuse the saying, reflected well for revisit, revise, reassess.
Yeah, well, I was working with the theme of reflection, and I was actually hand cutting these letters out of silver metallic paper because I wanted to see the reflection there. And one of the things that so often happens when I'm working in my art journal is that I get halfway through something and it takes me down a whole different road. You know, I revisit it, I reassess, and then I keep going. And I realized one of the things that I love to do is to use found materials, recycled materials, and a lot of different tools that aren't traditional art tools. And as I was peeling off the sticky backing of these silver letters, I realized, hey, I can use the backings as well. And that's when I decided to reverse them and put them underneath as though the word reflection was reflecting back on itself. And I was just so excited when you asked me to do this particular ism of yours, because it's one that speaks to me very personally. I had an issue with a past employer where they were trying to accommodate me. We decided what accommodations I needed. It was all in the budget. Everything was a go. And then it just sat on someone's desk for 8 months, nothing was done, and I had to keep advocating for myself. And eventually I left and started working for myself. So
that's pretty good reason. Wow, I feel like very psychic. But no, I really just am very glad you had the opportunity to not only reflect on this, but I keep wanting to say that because you did this great piece of our reflection, but also I think your honesty and your capacity as an artist to speak to the importance of art as a cathartic tool, as really a survival tool, is something that we can't ignore. The talent aside, the importance of this work for the very essence of the human being doing it. The importance, and I'm going to ask you about this, Heidi, why is it important that your piece is right now in this book? Why is it important to you?
it's important to me because I think, just looking at us all gathered here this evening, it's so wonderful that you've brought us all together, and everybody, it's such a diverse group, and everybody has so many different talents. And like you said in the beginning, you don't always know what's going on with somebody else. You don't know what their many talents are, and you might stop short based on whether you spot a physical disability or challenge they have, or it's the case with myself and some other people, it's an invisible disability that people may or may not understand, may or may not believe. So to be a part of this book was very, very personal for me. And as you know, I love working with the Reachability Group. I love working with all of your clients. As you mentioned earlier, I love teaching, and I really believe that there is an artist in everyone, and that art is so cathartic, it is so self-healing, and especially right now at a time like the pandemic, we just all really need that. And as a form of self-care and mindfulness for me, it's what gets me through day to day. Even though my daytime work, my other business is creative in nature as well, this is just such a part of who I am, and it's how I share myself with the world in many ways.
Well, I really appreciate it, and I'm always a big appreciator of any time someone takes something that someone else threw away and reuses it, because I'm obsessed with regifting. Although my family and friends give me things and make me promise not to regift, forget it, they're getting it. It's regift time. But more importantly, I really want to thank you, because I think your commitment to the community of persons with disabilities and the arts community is really unwavering, and I think we're all very lucky in this community to have you as one of those many advocates for that. And you and I sit on a couple of little groups together, and I'm always really impressed with the contribution you make, both from your heart and from your art. So, I'm going to quote that one later. But I want to thank you for that, Heidi, and really looking forward to seeing you again soon, because I'm always inspired by what inspires you. So we'll see each other soon. I'd just like to briefly share, these are the journals I've made during the pandemic, all made from
please show us. Wow. And all full of my every little bit of angst and emotion that I felt over the last 8 months. So
I love
next
that.
time we get together in person, I'll bring my journals.
I definitely have to get a closer look at that. Thank you again for your time, and I know that everyone will see Revise, Revisit, Reassess with that piece of reflection, and looking not only at themselves, but how others see them and how others see each other. And I think there's so much going on in that movement around the reflection, and I'm excited that people have an opportunity to, think about it a little bit. So you take care, my dear. We're going to be in touch soon. I know that. All the best.
Great.
This is so fun, meeting all the artists and chatting with them and getting to talk about the book and all of the isms. And I want to tell you that our next ism is one of my favorites, and my good pal Lee Cripps, who I was talking to earlier, has come back. Thank you, Lee. One of my favorite sayings in the book, Lee, maybe because I just love the alliteration, but pitch, don't bitch. And what I meant by that is all about problem solving. Sometimes as a group, we just run into the next person's office and go, what do I do? And my feeling is that as a leader, as from anywhere, we have to show through example the importance of pitching, not just complaining about something, but having a solution in mind, whatever that is. And I was really glad that we chose this piece by Lee, because in particular, I have to tell you, I love actually it's right over here, but I love the colors. I love the use of the crow. I can't believe how I feel like I could touch his fur, like on the crow. It's so beautiful and interesting. And I wanted to ask you, again, Lee, as I've probably been bugging you a little, but with the pitch, don't bitch idea, a crow, help me out. Tie it in for me, because I'm not the creative one here.
Well, crows, I love crows, and I use them as symbology a lot in my other artwork. They're very community oriented. They are known for their, territorial and very family oriented. They stay together with their families for years and years. They're lovely and wonderful and magical. And for this piece, I thought it was appropriate because, anyone working in an office environment will appreciate sometimes it can get a little toxic or people complain too much and then starts the ball rolling and the complaining just kind of snowballs. And it doesn't do anyone any good. And this year, especially, I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and ADD. And sometimes the atmosphere around me can really affect my mood, and that's probably true for a lot of people, regardless of a diagnosis. But I just feel that in a supportive environment, we can all thrive no matter what. And really, community support is so much better than just complaining, gossiping, or whatever the case. Crows are a great symbol of community unity.
I know that they're a very powerful symbol, and at the same time, I also know on the flip side, people think of the noisy crow, and like you said, the caw. So I wasn't sure, like, if I was just inferring all my crow issues because he's always outside my window making noise. So I actually was immediately drawn to the fact that it's often for me like a crow, not in the ways you were thinking. But I think it's funny how we all look at it, and isn't that the idea that we should interpret not what you wanted to say, but what it says to us. And I think that's the sign of true art, right? So it's pretty exciting. And that's certainly what I found your art did. But for me, the crow was like, oh, I think I met that person cawing outside my window, and so I was sort of taking it into a different place. But it just tells me again, Lee, that the work is so powerful that we can all keep learning from it and keep finding new things around it, and that makes it all the more exciting to me, frankly. So I really want to thank you for that as well, and for both contributions, because I just think that it's so powerful that we have these pieces of art demanding us to think beyond just that word. And I think that together we've put a much more powerful piece in the community and a place where people can land and really think about these things. So thank you for your contribution again. I promise I won't bug you again. We're awfully pleased you were involved, Lee, and thank you again for all the work you've been doing. I mean that. Now, the next ism, just so you know, is another artist who wasn't here, and I've spoken about him already, but just to remind you, Nigel Beck is an artist who does incredible photography. And for me, Nigel does a great job in capturing, again, the solitary nature of the message. So, one might think, well, what does an architectural barrier, an attitudinal barrier have to do with a phone? But actually, this is all around the communication piece, because the fact remains that people believe that if we could just remove the lack of a ramp, everyone's welcome. When in fact, it's not the architectural or ramp or the height of the desk that really makes us feel left out. It's the attitudinal approach. It's this belief that somehow those of us living with disability don't have as much to offer as anybody else. When in fact, we already know every one of us will be one of those people at some point in our lives. So the idea that we're allowing this stigma to continue, the idea that we're allowing these myths to permeate, is what's so discouraging. And I think Nigel did a beautiful job when I started to talk about these architectural barriers. Although they're important, it's really the attitudinal ones that need to be removed. I think that this piece allows us a moment to really reflect on what is he saying, why is he saying it this way, and it allows us to spend more time on the message, which is it's the attitudes. And where did we get these attitudes? Where do we buy into these myths? And can we show emotional intelligence and properly move our unconscious bias out of the way when in fact we're in this headspace of, well, I did the architectural thing, I put in the ramp, so I'm good. It's simply not enough. And that's why this ism is in there. And I do thank Nigel again for putting his very powerful photography in place to get us thinking even more about that. We must be getting close to one of my favorite gals because she works for me, I can say that. And this particular artist is someone that I respect on so many levels, but we're going to talk to her as an artist tonight, not as all the other things she does for reachability and for BAAFF, of which we are incredibly grateful. The ism is, I want to make you bolder, not better. And this can often be misconstrued, so I really want to take a second and tell you what I mean. I am not your therapist as an employer. I am not going to solve all of your problems as an employer. But I am going to give you the tools to allow you to be bold, to speak up, to contribute your creativity, your capacity to the understanding of the whole team. That's what inclusion is. And although sometimes people go, what do you mean you don't want to make them better? I'm not going to solve your issues. I'm not going to be your therapist, but what I am going to be is an employer who gives you the permission to be bold, that gives you the capacity to speak up with a creative idea and not be afraid of being shut down. Because if we keep shutting down creativity, I can assure you that business will fall behind. It is the diverse ideas and the creative ideas that are brought to the table by our diverse employees from diverse backgrounds with all kinds of unique experiences that make the difference. So let's welcome Tara Groot. And Tara is an interdisciplinary artist living here in Halifax. She's passionate about art as a tool for people to connect both to themselves and each other, and that the difference it can make on an individual and community level when we speak through art. She's done some really interesting art installation work around BAAFF at Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival. She has brought such a sensibility to the whole project. I feel very lucky to have someone with her creativity on our team, let alone in our book. So let's welcome Tara. And Tara, I'm really happy you're here with us tonight because your particular piece I love so much, but I think we're going to need some help. And that is just connecting the idea of bolder, not better, just wanting to make you feel empowered to do the best work you can do, and how these beautiful bowls that have both an organic yet such a colorful and embracing blowing color. I just love them. So please help us, Tara, first understand why you made the choice to do these bowls.
Sure. So thank you. It's been a real pleasure to be part of the book. And of course, I hear and use the isms so much here at Reachability, so it's been really interesting to tackle these isms from an artist perspective rather than somebody who's helping the community through Reachability and through that. So when I was assigned this ism, I want to make you bolder, not better, I was really thinking about how engaging people with disabilities really makes our world bolder and better. And so these works directly reference the artwork of Yayoi Kusama, who is a Japanese contemporary artist. And she lives by choice in a mental institution. And she creates art of all sorts of different kinds, but my favorite artwork of hers is these environments, these rooms that you go into, and everything is bold, patterned, whimsical, wild, and you go into these immersive worlds of hers where she's been really expressing her mental illness through these environments that you can go in and engage in. And I thought that really made a lot of sense. So I actually, they're not quite bowls, but I took globes apart, so literal worlds apart, and I painted on the...
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to misrepresent them. It was just the natural assumption, so I'm so glad you clarified that.
That's okay. So I was really thinking about, this idea of immersing, or this world inside of a world. And now we may not be able to cure disability or certain disabilities, but we can engage those who live with it. And in that way, we empower and enable all people to participate and contribute very valuable perspectives that truly enhance our world that we live in and work in.
That's really powerful. And again, I appreciate you clarifying the whole globe idea, because that actually adds a whole new element for me. I was really enjoying the aesthetic and just the combination of the colors and the way they move so much. I perhaps didn't even appreciate how many more layers there were to the work. And so thank you for sharing that. Tara, why do you think it's so important that we include artists alongside these isms and didn't just perhaps put the book out with isms and really good information and great ways to put these isms into practice, very, very functional. But somehow I just couldn't imagine it without the artists. And I wondered if you could help me articulate to all of the folks watching and joining us today.
Well, I think it goes back to the fact that we all have different voices and we all have different perspectives. And artists happen to be really great at visually representing different perspectives. And of course, somebody who's living with disability is going to have yet again another perspective from somebody who does not. And so I think it's really important for disability to speak on disability issues. And so the fact that we have a great community of artists who relate in some way with disability, whether that is visible, invisible, whatever kind it is, I think it's important that these isms are spoken about by that same community, and it helps to bring another perspective to the audience that you're trying to reach.
I really appreciate that, and I appreciate all the work you've been doing on behalf of the Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival all the time, because you are truly a creative inspiration to the rest of the team over here, and you keep us imagining things differently, and for that I'm very grateful. Thank you for joining us again, Tara. And I wanted to move to our next ism because it's one of the very first ones I ever came up with. And it was so simple, but yet it mattered so much to me. And that is simply the word stay curious. And I don't mean the kind of curious where you go, what the hell's wrong with you? That's not curious. I mean genuine curiosity, where you really wonder what's happening, where you really want to understand, not just want to rush through it, much like I might have done with my mother, where I didn't give her the dignity to really be able to say what she meant. And I think stay curious is very much a part of understanding what other people need, how to address it, listening well, and showing the level of emotional intelligence that is required in leaders if we are going to be removing the kinds of biases, whether conscious or unconscious, that exist in our workplace right now. And I was so pleased that Kristen Carter agreed to join us and take on this particular ism. Kristen is, in fact, a Nova Scotia artist who lives with an invisible disability. They started drawing as a way of coping with school and to improve their memory. And I want to thank Kristen and welcome Kristen today. Hi there, Kristen. Thank you for joining us. It's so fun having all the artists here. Kristen, for me, this is probably one of the most whimsical and interesting pieces. And I just wanted you, if you could, to help us understand the relationship between this lovely piece and Stay Curious, and how for you this informed it.
Okay. First of all, my name is Kirsten.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Kirsten. It's my fault. It says Kirsten. I read it wrong, and I'm so glad you corrected me. So forgive me again.
That's okay. So I find children and especially animals, they're always been curious and they'll always ask questions. A lot of times when you grow up or just you stop asking questions and you make assumptions. And I'm dyslexic and I have a lot of social anxiety. And so growing up, people wouldn't ask questions or listen when I would tell them that I needed things repeated or I needed time to get my thoughts together. And they'd get mad at me. So that's just something that it will always benefit to stay curious even as you grow older. Our society moves forward by people asking questions, being curious about things, whether it be in
technology or socially.
I'm sorry, please continue, please.
So in this picture, I kind of was just like thinking of the curiosity of children, kind of they're not just disregarding the dragon as another kite. They're actually like thinking and being curious and like, oh, what is that? And the little dragon is curious about the kite. She's not just ignoring it, and so yeah.
I appreciate that. How much of an influence is anime art for you? Am I jumping a big leap here? But it gave me a feel like something similar in the world of anime, and I wondered if I'm way off base because obviously you're the artist, or if you have a particular affinity to anime, or it just so happens that's just my take on it, which, by the way, is also part of looking at art, isn't it? Everyone having their own take. I wondered what your thought was.
Yeah, I've always had interest in like anime art and just cartoons in general, and drawing like cute little cartoons or creepy cartoons.
Sounds like fun, actually.
For you, go one extreme or the other. It's either really cute or really creepy.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. I'm really glad we went with the cute one. No offense, because I can handle creepy. I'm a big fan of Edward Gorey, I know, and that's some hardcore stuff, but I love the work. I really thought that, again, that whimsy you brought to the idea of curiosity was really effective. And I see people, when they look at the book, really spending some time on that piece of art and, again, allowing them to be curious and encouraging it, both through the art and through the statement itself, the ism and the explanation. And I'm really so grateful that you were able to provide this, because I think your perspective and your approach to it is uniquely yours as an artist, and that's something that we want to continue to promote, is the idea that there's such diverse artists with such diverse tastes, with so much to say. And for you personally, with this particular forum right now, is there something you want people to understand around the importance of art and the disability arts community for you?
Well, art, in regards to my disability, has always been helpful. Just especially like social anxiety, it just like gives me something. It's calming, and it makes a lot of times, like growing in school and stuff, just being around a lot of people, it just was a very calming thing to do, and just it actually helps me with my memory. Just like taking my short-term memory loss, kind of just like takes what I'm hearing and kind of just imprint it into what I'm doing, so that I look at the picture later and I can remember what I was listening to.
Wow, so it's, in a sense, art is also cues for you. I mean, you're using it in all of these ways that maybe the reader couldn't even imagine what it's doing. I mean, I can understand the obvious, and I'm sure most do, that you might feel better, but it's much more than that, you're saying. It's communicating to yourself as well as to others, and that's not something I had considered, so I really appreciate that perspective. Thank you so much. And by the way, I just want to say, Kirsten, that I will not get your name wrong again, because it is a unique name, and it's a beautiful name. So thank you. And thank you for allowing us to understand just a little bit about how we might be able to stay curious, and not just with the saying, but with art like yours, and understanding all of the ways that it informs who you are and who you choose to be. So again, thank you for that, and the opportunity to share your work with everybody, basically. So thanks again, and you take care. I got it down now.
Thank you for the opportunity.
No problem. So I wanted to get back to someone we visited earlier, because I think there's something, again, that Trudy Fong has to tell us. She also illustrated this piece for us, and I wanted you to know that I actually know one of the people in this piece, which makes me very happy. It features April Hubbard, who was in fact the Blue Nose Ability Arts and Film Festival ambassador. So not only does that really make it exceptional to me, but also I want to be clear that April, in fact, does perform with the Legacy Circus. So let's get Trudy back, if we can, and talk a little bit about this piece that does involve our own April, and perhaps allow her to talk a little bit to the inclusionism, which is working with people around inclusion might be different, but it is not difficult. And what I mean by that is, if we stopped assuming how something needed to be done and we're open to it being a little different, there's never going to be a problem with difficult. So what I wanted to see is if Trudy is not here, I think we lost her, and that's okay, because I love talking to her, but there's other people to talk to, and I'm okay with that, because frankly I'm running out of time and I could talk forever. So let's move on to the next ism, because I really love it. I make a difference because I can. And the reason that is the last saying in the entire book is because everyone watching tonight, everyone picking up the book, everyone receiving any of this information any way possible can make a difference. You know, I live by a quote. I never let what I cannot do get in the way of what I can do. Because there's plenty I can't do. But that's not going to stop me from drawing on the things I can do. And that's really what I make a difference because I can is all about. And I was really happy that another person who self-identifies as being on the ADHD spectrum took this on for me. And that's Tyler Hayden, who's also a motivational speaker and an author living in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. His busy mind, his words not mine, and hands are a gift. Did you say that? Are a gift delivered from ADHD. When he was out of work, he discovered folk art to keep him busy. And well, you know what? He's a damn good folk artist. So welcome, Tyler, and thank you so much for being here. I love your background. It wins the Whimsical Award of the night. Which Ninja Turtle? Which Ninja Turtle is it?
That's Donatello.
Donatello. That's very important information for the Ninja Turtle people. So thank you for that. I also really enjoyed the lighthouse behind you, Tyler. Really lovely. Tyler, what does I make a difference because I can mean, and why did you choose what I believe to be truly a superhero?
Absolutely. Well, it's a squirrel who's a superhero. I make a difference because I can. Is because for so long when you're a child with ADHD, you head through the day and you don't feel as though you're getting anything done. And I make a difference because I can is kind of embodies this idea and embraces the idea of being that squirrel and adding that squirrel superpower to your everyday. So I have this squirrel superpower, and the squirrel superpower has allowed me to write over 25 books, has allowed me to keynote stages from 8,000 people in Las Vegas to 6 people in Caledonia last week. It's the idea that the power that I have inside can really help to inspire others, and it is a superpower. So I can do things that are absolutely amazing as long as I'm willing to put myself out there, just like every single one of the artists in your amazing book have done so. So it's amazing when we take that effort and we take that opportunity, we can make amazing things happen.
I have to agree, and I have to tell you, when I first saw it, the whimsical word gets maybe a little overused, but oh boy, you captured that. I thought it was fun. I love the colors. They're so bold, and again, you can see that folk art sensibility in the bold color choices. And that little squirrel looks like he can get a lot done in a short amount of time. And I just, you cannot look at that and get the smile off your face. And I think that if we can end the book with both a smile and a message as powerful as never letting what you can't do get in the way of what you can, I think that we've done a very good job. And I don't think we could have done the job the same way without that piece, Tyler. So I really want to thank you for contributing it. It's I have the piece here somewhere hanging on the wall, and I absolutely love it. Now I do note one cheek must be very full, and one is not in the piece, if you recall. And I'm assuming he's getting ready to do what he can, even if there's things he can't do. That was just my interpretation.
It's because we're collecting so many things. Like right now, I have a teambuildingschool.com. I've got two new books that are in the works. I've got a few art pieces that are on the go. I'm in the middle of renovating my house. All of these things are inside my cheek, and eventually they become nourishment. But it takes time to get them out of my cheek. And for a while, we just store them there, and we just carry them around with us. And eventually we gnaw on them, and they become nourishment, and that's just how we live. That's who we are at the end of the day.
And again, I can't think of a better way to end that book on such a positive note as that. And I think that, again, the joy in your work comes out, and I want everyone to experience that same sense of joy, because there is a joy in being able to say, I'll never let what I can't do get in the way of what I can. That is so empowering, and I want to thank you for your time and your effort, especially a guy as busy as you with as many projects, that you were able to join us tonight and be part of this artist conversation about the importance of inclusion and the voice that both artists can bring to that discussion, not just necessarily the written word. And for all of these artists tonight, I think there's an incredible beauty in each one of those decisions to how to approach this, how to go forward. I obviously want to thank every single artist tonight that could join us, and even those that couldn't, for allowing us to celebrate their art in this book and contributing in this way. I do have to say a special thank you to Government of Canada, Building Communities Through Arts and Heritage, because they've really supported this project of bringing all these artist voices together and putting them in front of people who often don't see them. And in my opinion, if we're ever going to talk about monetization of art with persons with disabilities, we need to get the people who are spending money on putting huge art pieces in their lobbies. I need them to meet every one of these artists. And part of this book is to bring that to every single business person, while giving the tools on how to be inclusive, while giving clear, ways of doing it in practice, allowing this whole other part of your senses to consider it through the eyes of the artist. And that's been something so exceptional for all of us. Now, if you're interested in pre-ordering a copy of Win, 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 the 18 Inclusionisms you need to be a disability confident employer, then all you need to do is go to Amazon.ca, Amazon.com if you're in the States. It's a pre-order. It will be delivered by January. But if you simply cannot wait, contact reachability.org or go through BAAFF.ca, and you will find links to reach out to us and get that book to you ASAP. As you can see, we've got a few copies with us now that we could perhaps afford. And for those of you who don't know, I just wanted to acknowledge that the cover itself is an amalgamation of all the art. And I think it's really, really clever, and one of our own digital youth worked on that, and I'm so grateful. And finally, all I can say is it's been such an exciting time for me to get to talk to most of the artists who contribute to this. It's so empowering to me to see how artists take the words that I think speak for themselves and actually bring new layers of understanding and new perspectives to it. Something perhaps I wasn't even sure that would happen, but it certainly did. I want to let everyone know that Nova Scotia is loaded with fantastic artists, as is the rest of Canada. And these members of the disability arts community have so much to provide. And I only ask you all to engage and consider and screen in, not out, right? Because that's how we all win, win, win. My name is Tova Sherman, and I want to thank you all so much for joining me for this evening of virtual and real art and artists and incredible voices in this community that each need to be heard. I want to say, hey artists, thank you very much for all you do. You're incredible, and we are all blessed here in Nova Scotia to have each and every one of you as part of our community. Good night, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Oh, wait. I had problems with connections, and I wanted to speak to you just for a few seconds about art in general.
I know I called on you. We found you. Yay, we've got time. Artists, my big closing is a halt. We need to go back because, is that possible, Trudy?
Yep, you're good.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
The thing is that somehow or other, you know what you will notice that I had candles all behind me.
Yes, you did.
That was because I'm switching to solar power.
Oh, yay.
And so we had no electricity. So I set up a bunch of candles, and then I had my little ring light and a battery backup. And that's why I was peering.
Trudy, all good. Why don't you wrap us up tonight and really tie together why this art is so important for this book? Because maybe you can say it even better than I can.
Well, I've really loved everybody's art, and one of the things that I've discovered when I reintroduced myself to art a few years ago, because I kept thinking that art was something that was taking me away from what I wanted to do. And one of the things that I've noticed, I sketch everywhere. I'm an urban sketcher, and people can all look at the same thing and can come up with a completely different view. And that's one of the things that's most fascinating about going to a sketch out with other people, is that everyone sees the world a different way. And that's the wonderful thing about it. And I run across a lot of people who try to get involved in art, and then they'll say things like, oh, well, I'm not very good, or I didn't do it because I wasn't as good as the next guy, or all these other reasons. But the fact is that everybody's art is actually giving people an opportunity to see what's inside their head. When you write something down in a journal, it's a very personal thing, and that's wonderful. But when you're drawing something, you're also taking something from deep down inside yourself and putting it out into the world, right? And so when I meet people, when I meet another artist, and this is my journal, and I love that other woman when she showed all her pandemic journals. This is my pandemic journal, and it's all the stuff that I've been experiencing.
Beautiful.
While we're going through this, and it helps me to process. Like, this is New Brunswick inside of a snow globe, because if we're not all careful, New Brunswick could be trapped inside their own little snow globe all winter, right? So we feel things. And when I meet another artist, it gives me a chance to see what's inside their heart and what's in their head. When they show me their drawings, I'm communicating on a whole other level than verbally. And that is what art should be about, not about making money or being better than the next guy or comparing yourself. It should be about being able to take what's inside you and bring it out. And I didn't get a chance to talk about the aerialist, April Hubbard, but when I was asked to do some drawings for the for reachability, I thought of her immediately, because she has the courage to get out there and do aerial exercises and all that, flying through the air, something I wouldn't have the courage to do. So although she has mobility challenges, she has something that I don't have, which is courage. But I have it in my art, and I think it's the most important thing for us to have, is to have the courage to express ourselves and to put ourselves out there, and to not judge ourselves using this inner critic that can crush ourselves.
I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate the fact that you're bringing together the importance to each of these artists of their ability to express, and then getting that work in front of other people. Because as you said, it speaks so much more than words. And I love the fact that we can all see something uniquely different and find something in each of these artists' work. And the fact that whether the artists themselves saw it, they've gotten their piece out of it. Now it's our turn to try to draw and experience from it, and to understand better what this book is all about through the art. I think this is one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in my entire life, being able to bring these artists and these words together, because I believe the impact is so much purer and so much more clear by having this opportunity. And I'm glad you came back on, because it means a lot to me that you can bring together the importance of the art, the words, and of course the truth, which is what it's all about. Truth to yourself, and being able to say, I deserve to have a voice. And believe me, every one of these artists and every human being in your community, whether they live with disability or not, has that same right. And I think it's very exciting, and I hope everyone will grab a copy and share with everyone they know the incredible art and the incredible vision of these Maritimers. Thank you all very much, and thank you for coming back on, Trudy. We're really grateful. All the best, artists. I'm saying goodnight one more time, but this time I mean it. All the best, everybody.
Okay, bye.